Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So many people know that I'm a Pan-Africanist. I regularly talk about the need for us to identify as Africans, for us to identify with our African heritage and history. And I often talk about Black empowerment worldwide. And it was an honor and a privilege to actually have the opportunity to visit the motherland. And this definitely will not be my last trip to Africa and to Ghana in particular. It was an amazing journey, and I have to share this experience with you. Ghana is by far one of the most welcoming places that I've ever been in my entire life. The people there embraced us. The people there showed us love. They embraced us as we are their long lost brothers and sisters, and they treated us as such. And I will remember that experience for the rest of my life. One of the reasons why I chose to go to Ghana first out of any African country is because of Ghana's ties to Pan-Africanism, not just in the past, but in the present. The first president of Ghana was Kwame Nkrumah, one of the world's greatest Pan-Africanist leaders ever. So I had to go to Ghana. And also, it's the resting place of the brother W.E.B. DuBois, one of the greatest scholars in human history. So one of the first things that I did when I got to Ghana was visit the W.E.B. DuBois Center and the Kwame Nkrumah Center. Now, when I first touched down in Africa, it was just like a almost unreal type of experience. Like after, reflecting on the idea of going to the motherland, it was something else to actually go there. And as we were traveling to Ghana in the plane, first I flew from Baltimore to JFK in New York, and from JFK I flew to Ghana. And the flight to Ghana was about 9 hours long. And the flight was packed. It was filled to capacity. And as I was flying to Ghana, I thought about our ancestors that actually traveled by boat, slave boat, from Ghana to the Americas. And as I thought about how long this journey was by flight, I just reflected on how that can't compare to what our ancestors went through, being crammed into slave ships like sardines and forced to wallow in their own waste and go on a journey that was over 30 days long. It just made me reflect on the journey of our ancestors to this country. So when I got there, again, we went to the W.E.B. Du Bois Center and the Kwame Nkrumah Center, and both of those men are heroes. Those men are legends. And it was an honor and a privilege to be able to visit their burial sites. While I was in college, I was taught about Pan-Africanism. One of the main people that first taught me about Pan-Africanism was a college professor by the name of Dr. Ron Walters. This brother actually taught a course called Pan-Africanism. That's when I first learned about the very concept of Pan-Africanism, the concept that we have a shared destiny and shared culture and a need to unite worldwide as a people if we are to overcome colonialism and discrimination. So, that brother laid the foundation. He taught me about people like Kwame Nkrumah. And then another brother helped raise my consciousness as well, the brother Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. Kwame Ture in his early days was a prominent figure in the civil rights movement. He was one of the leaders of the Black Power movement, and then he went on to be a part of the Pan-African movement, and he joined the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And I used to study with the All-African People's Revolutionary Party when I was in college. I heard many of the brother Kwame Ture's lectures, and that inspired me to learn more about Pan-Africanism. So it was an honor to actually visit the site where the brother Kwame Nkrumah was buried, to see the monuments dedicated to this great man, and then to visit W.E.B. Du Bois' resting place as well. As many people know, an NAACP attorney, and W.E.B. Du Bois was a founder of the NAACP, and he was also a founder of the Niagara movement, which came before the NAACP. He was the editor of the Crisis magazine, a prominent scholar, and a prominent Pan-Africanist. He organized many Pan-Africanist congresses. The brother is a legend, so it was an honor to actually visit his gravesite. To visit this great man's gravesite and to visit the center and to learn more information about him and his legacy. That was the first part of my trip. This was in Accra. During our trip in Accra, we visited, an art marketplace where there was beautiful art, and a band playing drums and all that kind of stuff. It was a powerful experience. Later, in the days following, we actually went on a cruise on Lake Volta. That's one of the biggest lakes in West Africa. The view was absolutely amazing. It was great to actually to cruise that lake, and listen to a great band playing, all kinds of music, playing reggae, playing Afrobeat, playing traditional Ghanaian music. It was a great experience, a lot of fun. On this trip, I ate some great foods. I had different jollof rice meals. I had fufu. I had banku and red, all these great, delicious dishes in Ghana. It was amazing. So after the cruise of the Volta, we actually, the following days or so, we actually participated in a naming ceremony. And I had no idea that we were going to participate in a naming ceremony. I just thought that we were going to visit a community, visit some elders, visit a royal family. And it's just something about visiting and seeing African royalty in person. So we visited, a royal family. And once we were there, we realized that we were going to participate in a naming ceremony. All of us were dressed in white. We appeared before one of the chiefs or princes and one of the kings. And they asked us a series of questions, and before the ceremony even got started, as many people know, there was libations, libations to honor the ancestors. And that's one of the things that's very important in African society and Ghanaian society in general. To honoring the ancestors is fundamental. It's a fundamental part of Ghanaian society and African society, period. So they started with the libations. We appeared before the king individually. We were dressed in all white. We were asked to sip from a bowl, a small bowl. We sipped water, and we also sipped alcohol. Both substances looked the same, and there was a lesson about how although these two different liquids look the same, they're fundamentally different. And they asked us questions about, like, why do we want to take on African names? And I told the chief that it was important for us to know our identity and to know the meaning of names and to, be connected with our African heritage. And, after going through the questioning, we received a certificate. And here is my certificate right here. And this is the name that I was given. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a second. But, they asked me about embracing an African name. And I have what I've been told is an African last name. Asaka is my last name. My name is Anson Asaka, as many people know. Uh, I received my last name from my father's family. You know, they changed their name before I was born to Asaka. They say that that was their original, you know, the original name of my great grandfather. They tell us that he came from the Sudan. Uh, but in terms of the actual meaning of Asaka, I have no idea. In many ways, it's like an X. You know, like in the Nation of Islam, they have an X. So for me, that's like a unknown factor. And I've been told that that name is similar to, like, you know, some American names like a Smith or something like that, where it has no particular meaning. It just is what it is. So it's like an unknown. And I don't really know if that folklore is true or not. And I plan to get a DNA test so that I can know exactly which region of Africa I come from. I know that my father had one, but I need to have one as well, so that I can know which region of Africa I come from, which particular ethnic groups I belong to. So for me, it was important to participate in this ceremony. And I will never forget the experience, and I will carry this name with me in spirit. So I was given the name Kwadwo John. And in Ghanaian society, men and women are named based, you know, their first name is based on what day of the week they were born. I was born on a Monday, and the name for Monday born males is Kwadwo. So that is the first name that I took on. And then the second name is John, and that means rich savior. So that is the name that I was given, and the name was given by the Sona royal family. So here's the certificate. So that is in a lot of ways, that's a spiritual name. It's a name that I won't abandon. It's a name that I will continue to embrace, even though I will continue to use my legal name. But it was a powerful experience, you know, appearing before these royals, African royals, and taking on an African name with a clear meaning, clear definition. And the other thing that I want to point out about that name is that I am actually named after one of the chief's uncles. So when he sees me, he refers to me as uncle because of that. So, you know, we actually traveled, you know, just to give you some background, we traveled in the mountains near Accra, and we visited the royal family. We were actually at their palace. You know, the palace is under construction. And it was just a powerful experience, a real moving experience. So the next thing I want to talk about is our journey to Kumasi. We traveled to Kumasi. And one thing that I want to say before I get into the journey is, as we were traveling, our tour guide, the brother Nee, and his name is also TT, that brother gave us advice. You know, he gave us information about African tribes in Ghana. You know, he mentioned, for instance, that there are like 80 different ethnic groups in Ghana alone, and they speak 80 different languages. And that's one of the challenges of Pan-Africanism, because even though, you know, we're all black people, African people, there are many differences. There's much diversity on the African continent, and much diversity even in one nation like Ghana. And one thing that he emphasized is like how many of these modern African nations are nothing but creations of Western powers when they divided up the continent and determined which countries would go to which colonial powers. So you have ethnic groups that are split in half, divided between different countries and stuff like that because of that. So throughout the trip, he gave us informative information about the Akans, you know, these various different ethnic groups throughout Ghana. And when we went to Kumasi, another guide joined us from Kumasi that is familiar with Kumasi's history and the tribes and all that kind of stuff. So Kumasi is like the center of the Ashanti kingdom. And many people have heard about the Ashantis. I thought that they were one tribe, but actually the Ashantis are a coalition of various tribes who decided to join forces in war, to join forces against a common enemy. And so while we were in Kumasi, we visited the sword site. So there's a site where they say a golden throne descended from the heavens as a sign of the Ashanti kingdom being formed. And also a sword was planted in the very site where this golden throne descended from. So that sword was embedded in the ground, and it continues to be embedded in the ground today. And they say that if that the sword cannot be removed, if the sword is ever removed from the ground, then the Ashanti kingdom will collapse. It will fall apart. So they perform rituals around this particular sword. It's the site of a cultural center, and we visited that cultural center. And as I'm discussing these things, I'll show you different images. So, so we saw that site, and they told us about how Muhammad Ali visited that site back in the day, a long time ago, and actually tried to remove this sword from that site, and he was unable to do so. So there was a lot of great history there. We went to another cultural center, the the second museum, and hopefully I'm not butchering the pronunciation, but that's the name of one of the chiefs or kings in the Ashanti kingdom, one of the significant kings in the kingdom. Another thing that I want to, and so in that particular museum, we learned about Ashanti culture. We learned about the different groups that united, the different symbols for each different group or tribe within the Ashantis. We also learned about Asantewa, Queen Asantewa, and her fight against British colonialism. A great illustrious history. We learned about Kente cloth as well. We learned about a lot of things dealing with the Ashanti Empire. It was a powerful experience learning all this history, learning about these great African kings. And, one thing that I have to mention is just the black image, the power of the black image. Throughout Ghana, we saw powerful black images. There are statues dedicated to African kings and queens and African heads of state, African historical figures. And I'm sure the people that live in Ghana that see those black images every day, all day, take them for granted. But it's something when you come from a country like America where most of the images are white, where you're constantly bombarded with the image that white is power, that white is beautiful. It is something else to be in a country where you see black images constantly. You see powerful, positive black images, seeing all those black kings. Like in most of the cities in Ghana, like you have these areas where they're like roundabouts, like centers of town. And in each one of those centers, you see a different image of an African king or queen or African head of state or other significant African figures. In addition to that, you see billboards. Most of the billboards are billboards of black people. The overwhelming majority of them are black. And it's something powerful about that, seeing beautiful, powerful black images of a black women's images being celebrated. And this is something that I discussed with the people that I was with. We talked about how powerful these images are. Images where the beautiful black woman is the brown-skinned or the dark-skinned black woman, not some racially ambiguous person that's barely black as the image of blackness, but beautiful, powerful Black images. So that is one of the things that will last a lifetime in terms of this experience. And we take things like money for granted, like we see money every day, all day. But on the money here in America, all we see are white faces. Even though Black people have contributed to the history of the American society, you don't see any Black images on the money. And that speaks to the continued invisibility of Black people in this country. But in Ghana, you have Black people on the money. And this is a Ghana 5 CD bill, and that's what they call, Ghana dollars. They're called CDs. So this is one, and then I have some coins over here as well. You may not be, you probably can't see that, but I had to keep that, because the image is power. That's one of the things that was powerful about this experience of going to Ghana. Another thing is, like, after we visited those cultural sites, we went to visit a brass making site where we learned about the brass making process, how Africans, Ghanaians in particular, make brass artworks. We actually got to see a lot of those pieces and, learn about the process and purchase some of the pieces. We learned also about Kente cloth. We went to a Kente cloth factory where we actually saw Kente cloth being made and learned about the significance of Kente cloth. Kente cloth is a very special fabric in Ghanaian society. It is only worn for special occasions like weddings and royal ceremonies and things of that nature. It's not something that you just wear for the sake of wearing. It is very significant in Ghanaian society. Also, we learned about how when visiting a royal ceremony or something like that, people need to consult the king to find out what the king is wearing. Reach out to the king's people to find out what the king is wearing, because it is a big faux pas or, or a cultural mistake for somebody to go to a royal event and try to outshine the king. And it just reminds me of that one of the rules of the 48 laws of power, never outshine the master and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the rules. Like, people are ostracized for doing that. So you can't stunt on the king. You got to know what the king is wearing before you go to an event. So that was one of the things that we learned, just about Kente cloth. And I actually purchased some Kente cloth. I got my brother a gift and bought some fabric, for, some clothing for myself and souvenirs for relatives and family. So after we left Kumasi, we journeyed to Cape Coast. And that experience of going to Cape Coast is something else. Like, I can't even describe it. So Cape Coast is where a lot of the slave dungeons are located. And we visited 2 slave dungeons. But before we went to the slave dungeons, we actually visited the site where African slaves received their last bath, where African slaves were auctioned, where they were branded and all that kind of stuff, and then sent on a journey to the castles or dungeon. Dungeon is the better word to use to describe these places. They talked about how rebellious enslaved Africans were buried alive at this particular site. And we actually got a chance to go into the river, and to bathe ourselves as our ancestors did. We honored the ancestors. We were in communion with the ancestors. And as we were washing ourselves, they asked us to wash ourselves of certain things. And I chose to wash myself of ignorance, to wash myself of poverty, to wash myself of self-hatred. So it was just a moving experience. Like, I could feel the presence of the ancestors there as we were in communion with them, as we were in that river taking our last bath. It is something that I will never forget. I will remember it for the rest of my life. And so after that, we went on a journey to Cape Coast. And then, after we settled in and all that kind of stuff, the following day, if I'm not mistaken, we went to Elmina slave castle. And then we also went to Cape Coast slave castle. And it is just something else to actually walk in the footsteps of our ancestors, to see the dark dungeons where our people were held, to learn about the feces and the waste that covered them when they were stuck and trapped in these dungeons. And to actually see the door of no return at both of these dungeons was a moving experience. When we went to these sites and we were at the door of no return, we actually participated in libations. We honored the ancestors. And one of the things that we did is we took libations and we rubbed it over the door of no return. And as one of the sisters was performing a ritual around that, I could feel the energy and the power of the ancestors. I could literally feel their presence. And it was just a very moving experience to see that door of no return, to see the place where our ancestors went through, knowing that they would never see their home again, and seeing the ocean, the seemingly endless ocean on the other side of that door of no return. And one of the things that the tour guide taught us was that we are our ancestors, that we are there for a purpose. We were meant to return to that site. When they sent our ancestors through that door, they didn't think we would ever return, but we returned when we went to those castles, or dungeons rather, to learn about the cruelty that our ancestors went through, to actually see the shackles for ourselves, to see how dark and how small these dungeons were where our people were crammed in, was just something else. And one of the most disturbing aspects of the visit to these dungeons was the fact that in both of these dungeons there was a church built above the dungeons. And in one of the dungeons, it had the church actually had scripture on the wall, citing something from Psalms. And just seeing that just made me think about how diabolical and evil and wicked these people were that enslaved our ancestors. As they were praising God, they were persecuting and punishing and abusing and raping and beating and branding and doing all kinds of unspeakable acts to our ancestors. And I just thought about, like, what kind of religion is this? What kind of religion is this that would allow these people to commit this kind of cruelty while they praise this white God? So that inspired me to write a poem, and I will post the link in the cards to that poem. And the poem is called White Jesus Poison. And as I looked out, they showed us like all the churches surrounding the slave dungeon, these churches that popped up. And as we were traveling, we saw like all these Christian churches and stuff like that. And it just made me think about like the legacy of colonialism, how they used religion as a tool of colonialism. Because one of the very few white images that I saw when I was in Ghana was a white Jesus. And it just made me think about how that white Jesus is used as psychological poisoning of the minds and the souls of people. Because even though you have these black images, the one image of your God is a white image. And I think that alone does great psychological damage to our people. So that inspired me to write the poem. And again, I will post the link in the card so that you all can check that out. So yeah, I mean, that was just something else. Like, it took a lot for me to absorb that experience. So after that, we got a chance to relax on the coast of Ghana, on Cape Coast, to settle our minds and our spirits and stuff, which was what much needed after that. After seeing that, those dungeons where our people went and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that was something else. And then we learned a lot again, like during our travels. During our travels from Accra to Kumasi to Cape Coast, we had these tour guides that were providing us with a lot of great information about African culture. And one of the things that was very interesting to learn is just about the significance of women in African society, in Ghanaian society in particular. One of the things that I learned is that they have a matrilineal system, where people inherit royalty through their mother, and they inherit property. Property goes to women in a Khan society, and a Khan is like a large group or large tribe in Ghana. So people inherit, for instance, in Ghanaian society, if I passed away, my property would not go to my daughters. It would go to my sister's son. And another thing is that when a king passes away, it's the queen mother who decides who will be the next king. So women have great influence and power, even though you do have, kings that are able to marry many women and stuff like that. Women do have power and influence within Ghanaian society. And I was really surprised by that. I didn't know that they had a matrilineal type of system. One thing that I want to talk about, and that I must talk about, is just like Pan-Africanism again. This trip just made it clear to me how vital Pan-Africanism is. As we were learning about the slave trade, we learned, obviously learned about the role that Africans played in the enslavement of Africans. We learned about how basically the white man divided and conquered African people. He gave Africans guns and alcohol in exchange for prisoners of war. And so that basically fueled violence between different ethnic groups, and it fueled the slave trade. And so you had these different groups, different ethnicities that didn't view themselves as all black people or as one African group of people. They viewed themselves as their individual tribes. And in many times they did not speak even the same language. So they didn't view themselves as one people, and that made it easy for this goddamn white man to enslave African people, because you had Africans that were participating in the slave trade. The slave trade would not have been possible if Africans did not participate. So one of the things that just blew my mind is just thinking about the demographics, like how they were talking about how there would only be like 100 white people in a slave dungeon. But these white people were surrounded by African communities. That the castles were predominantly African. But yet and still, these white people were able to sell Africans and abuse and brutalize and oppress Africans because some Africans participated in this trade. Even though I'm sure they did not understand the full scope of what was going to happen to the enslaved Africans. Because slavery, as many people know, existed on the African continent and throughout the world, but it was in no way, shape, or form similar to American slavery or, slavery during the Middle Passage. So they had no idea exactly. I don't think they knew the scope of what they were doing. And another thing is this: the slave trade and the resulting tribalism that was exacerbated made Africa ripe for colonialism because they were draining their human capital and divided and conquered. So it was easy for that white man to come in and take over and to colonize people. They talked about how they were competing European groups, basically waging proxy wars through various African tribes. So all of this made it clear that we African people worldwide must unite if we are to advance as a collective. Otherwise, we will continue to be the step stools for society, for not only throughout the diaspora, but in the world, in Africa. Africa will continue to be exploited as long as African people are not united. We cannot afford to be divided, between black men and black women. We cannot afford to be divided between African immigrants and African Americans. We don't have the luxury of being divided at this time when Africans worldwide are being persecuted. We see what's going on in Ukraine, where they're refusing to allow Africans to leave. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that stood out to me about this experience: the importance of Pan-Africanism, the need for us to unite as a people. Yeah, so there's one other thing that I want to talk about, and that's just like some cultural things about this experience. Like, one of the things that's very important in Ghanaian society is the throne. Like, they have stools that are for royalty, and that particular stool is used throughout the country. Buildings are created to replicate those famous stools that the people use in Ghana. So, that's one thing that's very significant. This is another significant symbol in Ghanaian society. I purchased this while I was in Ghana, the horn blower. Whenever royalty is coming, you have horn blowers announcing the presence of royals. So that's another important symbol in Ghanaian society. Another thing that I want to talk about is the great food that I had when I was there. I mean, the food was just amazing. I had fufu, I had jollof rice, I had, red, banku. I had some great food, like great fresh fish. We had some great lobster and chicken and shrimp. Like the food was delicious. There are some, in addition to, the great food that we had, like, there's some exotic food that I did not try. I did not have the courage to try these snails. Like I've had escargot. Like when I went to Paris, I had escargot. But they have these huge snails. And we saw these like while we were traveling from Kumasi to Kumasi. Another exotic food that they have that people call bushmeat, and it's also called grass cutter, which is like a huge rodent. And I did not have the courage to try that out, but the food was great. And I again highly recommend that brothers and sisters visit the motherland, go to Ghana in particular. And if you're going to Ghana, if you're thinking about going to Ghana, I encourage you to use Talking Drum Tours. I will include their contact information again in the description box, email addresses and website information. They have a trip that's coming up in May, and they also have a trip in June, if I'm not mistaken. So I highly recommend that. We had great tour guides that know Ghana and know the various cities that we visited rather. And I just wanted to recite a couple of great proverbs that we were told while while we were going through Kumasi. The brother Sly gave us some proverbs, and I'm going to read a couple of them. The first one is, "The day the mosquito perches on your scrotum, you learn to resolve conflict without violence." That was a funny proverb, and one of the tour guides, basically, that's one of her favorite proverbs. Another one is, "He who has no teeth need not fight over a bone." So throughout the trip, we had, we were given these wise proverbs, and again, we learned a lot about the different ethnic groups. We learned about one ethnic group in particular. I'm gonna have to leave in a second, but we learned about one group in particular, Labadis, and basically that particular tribe is the La people or lay people. They were called baddies because they resisted colonialism. They would destroy the slave masters' property and all that kind of stuff when they would leave at night. So they got that title, baddie. And basically that has a negative connotation in Ghanaian society. So that particular group wants to drop the baddie label, and they tell people to drop it. But in America, we were talking about how in America that would be like a badge of honor, because, women, for instance, call themselves baddies and all this kind of stuff. And you hear the expression bad boy and this and that. But anyway, this was an amazing trip. And if you've been to Ghana, tell me about your experience. Or if you've been to another African country that you recommended I visit, please tell me about that experience. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Please rate, comment, subscribe.